welcome to our panel about how to raise money as the odd woman out. We are so excited to share with you how we stepped outside the traditional channels of fundraising to reach a new network of investors, people that really mirrored the passion and interest of our core consumer here at Garden Society versus the more traditional channels of fundraising. So I'm Karli. I am the co-founder and CMO here at Garden Society. Garden Society is a wine country cannabis brand driven toward bringing more joy to women's everyday lives. So it's really something that Erin and I set out to build authentically for our own needs and also needs like many men and women around the world like us. We were founded in 2016 and we brought in our first round of fundraising at the end of 2018. We are fully licensed and we are distributed throughout the state of California. So all that said, I want to introduce our wonderful panel to dear friends. First, I'll introduce my partner and our founder at Garden Society, Erin Gore.
Oh, sure. So I'm a mom, a wife, I would say modern woman. I'm actually a big dork and a pot lover extraordinaire. I was a chemical engineer in school. I fell in love with cannabis because I was a Division I athlete and ended up dealing with chronic pain in my hips and sleeplessness, and really fell in love with cannabis. I got it. The chemical engineer brain of mine became obsessed with the science. And then as I progressed through my corporate career and I started having more achievements, my husband started having achievements, and we started struggling with fertility and struggling to find balance and ultimately struggling to find joy. I realized I kept turning back to cannabis as a solace for me and help me be a better version of myself. And then I realized that all of my friends were in the same position, struggling with the same things, and they were also looking for cannabis to help them. And that was really the precipice for why we created Garden Society. It was to really just normalize and educate and create products that we love in a way that help us find more joy and be a better version of ourselves. So we're vertically licensed. I never thought chemical engineering would be so relevant as it is today. The amount we learn and grow every day as a cannabis operator, as a licensee, as a startup, as female founded, with the challenges of raising money as a female founder and what that means. It's definitely been a learning curve, and we're really excited. We're proud of what we've built. We're proud of the amazing champions and supporters we have. We're passionate about our customers, and we're excited to share as much as we can with you all today.
Awesome. Well, speaking of amazing champions, we also have joining us today Sonia Luna, a fellow entrepreneur. She is the founder of Aviva Spectrum, and she is also one of the investors on the Amazing Women's Slate that we're going to talk about today. So with that, Sonia, I'd love for you to share a little bit about yourself.
Sure, great. Thank you for having me on this panel. It's such a pleasure to be here with you ladies at Garden Society. Quick general background. I am your very typical accountant, but I am also a mom of two boys, very active 9 and 7-year-olds. And I'm married. I've been together with my spouse. She and I have been together now for 18 years. It's a long time.
Oh,
yeah.
Congratulations.
I know, crazy. I say it, sometimes I don't even believe it. And I've been an accredited investor for over, I'll say it's actually as long as I've known Natalia, 18 years. And I've made some investments in tech, mainly software, technology, that sort of thing. And I got introduced to cannabis just from the perspective of servicing the cannabis industry, accounting and tax and compliance, et cetera. But I'm also part of a network of other investors. And I got introduced to Garden Society through my investor network. And a gentleman referred me to Garden Society to chat with the ladies here and the founders. And I had met them early on before my investment 2 years ago. I heard the pitch.
You did.
I did not dip my toes in any cannabis investment. I waited a year. I just wanted to kind of hold off and see what would happen. I was very grateful to Erin's presentation and how she poised the company. And long story short, after that second introduction to the company in a more in-depth way, that's how we kind of our match made in heaven, so to speak, happened. So I'm so grateful to be part of the team, and I'm grateful to help the ladies and the team any way I can.
Thank you so much, Sonia. We're grateful for you. Sonia was one of our first investors that was actually out hitting the streets for us, helping us get new placements and retailers. So you have been already so valuable to us.
I'm going to talk about that.
Yes. So Erin, that said, tell the audience a little bit about how you came to this idea of building this women's slate of investors and what led you to that decision.
Sure. When our first investment was by two family offices. They're incredible, Big Rock Partners, Artist Labs. They've known us for a while. They were watching us. They loved our products. It's Mike Harden and Joyce Snelly. So they're a really great team. And we got that investment. Then we were looking forward and saying, okay, we're going to have to fundraise again. We started the more traditional route of fundraising. So I went to some of the investment conferences. I started talking to the large funds. I started talking to and really working the network and meeting people and learning. I had never fundraised before starting Garden Society. I had a 10.5-year career at a corporate CPG company. I was really good at math. I had run actually a P&L in that CPG company, but it's very different when you have unlimited resources, for lack of a better word. You're never worrying about paying payroll. You don't even know what rent is. You don't even know, I just would build my business on a budget, right? So now we're in a very different cash focused game. And I had to figure out, okay, if we start scaling, start doing our goals, this is going to get really hard and we're going to have to get cash in to do this. And the biggest thing I didn't anticipate when people say, what's the biggest thing you've learned, is how hard and expensive it is to grow as a cannabis business, because we don't have access to banking services. We don't have access to line of credit. And so it's about what's your cash flow to enable your growth. How are you spending? How are you collecting? Where are you growing? All of that, not growing literal in the sense of growing a flower, but growing in your business. And how do you resource that? And so it became very obvious we needed to fundraise. When we set out to do it, it was a little intimidating. Although Karli and I did personality tests, and I don't really get scared from things. Maybe it's because I'm 6'2". I think that's it. But anyway, I was just like, okay, here we go, another challenge. I don't know if the audience knows, but less than 2% of all capital invested in venture capital goes to women. So if you look at the odds set out in front of us, with less than 2% goes to female-founded companies. And then in the cannabis industry, it's even smaller. I heard 0.4% at one point in time. We had a really steep uphill battle that we were facing. And I think it was kind of good that we were a little oblivious and a little we'll do this because we do everything. We just charge through the roadblocks. As we started in the journey, we realized that a lot of the more traditional popular funds, we were too small of a business for. So what stage of business you were in mattered, what your growth trajectory looked like mattered. Quite frankly, what your popularity looked like mattered. How many Instagram followers did you have? Were you cool enough? That's how some of these investors think, quite honestly. Then I started hearing comments well, you don't have any female investors. So how do we know that your product's good for women when women don't support you? And I started thinking, well, there aren't any women investors. Look around. There's no women founders. There's no women investors either. So Karli and I started brainstorming and thinking okay, how do we rewrite a different script? How do we show these more traditional cannabis funds and these larger ticket writer men that the women that we serve believe in the mission that we're doing? And the one thing Karli and I had done is we had built up an incredible network of supporters. So we had some really wonderful champions, people who believed in us as leaders. They saw all the adversity we'd overcome. They loved our product. They loved our messaging, our education. And so we started brainstorming, what if we could actually get women investors in our company? What would that mean? What does that look like? How would that work? Who would that serve? So we talked to our attorneys, and we actually got some advice of an incredible family office in New York that actually did invest in us. And they suggested to us to do a bridge round. They said, Erin, you're too small for the Series A. You're not at the right point in your company. Why don't you go out and do a bridge on a simple, safe note so that you can actually get the investment, but build the company to the next level before you do a price round. So again, that was the right type of fundraising for the right stage of company in a vehicle that made it easy to achieve. So all three of those. So I learned that. We talked to our attorneys, they made it happen. And then what we were able to do is Karli and I said, well, let's build a slate of female investors. We just created it because we're like, wouldn't it be badass to actually like have women stand behind you with their dollar? You know, the best way women can support women is by investing in them or transacting with them. It's not about sharing on social media or this or that. It's about put your money where your mouth is. And so we came up with this idea and then we loved it. We started tossing it around. What could it be? We started conceptualizing, pitching it to media, but first we had to find the women. First we had to find our slate before we could do this. So then this became my mission from last fall was like, let's find our women. And I knew that women were out there and I knew that people loved our product and I knew that our mission resonated so deeply with those who got it. Because I pitched so many people at that point. And I wasn't looking for the person who thought, oh, women aren't scalable, not my investor, right? I wasn't looking for the person who said, oh, you don't have any women investors. You must not be authentic. Not my investor, right? So I knew we just had to figure out how to find them and they were there because we knew people loved our product and we knew the customer we serve and we knew there were women like us out there. And so that was how we kind of crafted this idea. And then we set out to find them. Sonia.
In that process, we found Sonia. And so Sonia, what I wanted to ask you from your sort of, that was where we were going with Garden Society and how we set up with this idea. So then when this was presented to you, what did you see as the value of becoming an investor in Garden Society and part of this women's slate?
Man, thanks. Oh my God. Well, that was a great, intro and a good overview, Erin, of the struggles. And what's interesting, the SBA as an organization, when you look at businesses that do succeed, when women run them and they have a clear leadership panel, meaning in the C-suite or upper management, they actually have a higher probability of success. So I find alarming and interesting because women actually are a little bit more conservative with the cash that they get from their investors. So it's just one stat that I think people should be aware of, that when $1 of investment goes to an all-male team versus a diverse team, in particular women-led team, you have a higher chance of getting that ROI from an investor's perspective. Okay, but that's not the end-all be-all. Let me step back. Like, why did I take the call with Erin, and what was it about the call that made me take the next step and start looking at the deck and, taking a look at some of the forecasts and financials, et cetera. So I took the call based on a recommendation, the referral that put us together. And immediately I could tell Erin was very passionate, and she was not only getting the business milestones accomplished, but I could see she had a clear path of, these are the next things that we're going to hit. This is the targets that we're going to achieve. This is some of the operational things. Here are some of the sales and marketing things that needed to happen. So taking a look at the deck, what I found interesting just from an investor standpoint to founders is I felt the team was open to constructive criticism, not in a way that would be demeaning. It was more inspirational, like, hey, by the way, I've seen this and this work best here. And it resonated with the team. So I felt like there was camaraderie happening immediately. So that was one factor. The second factor is I'm a data kind of person. I mean, not only in my profession, but just in general in my investments. And I always felt whenever I picked up, let's say, a dispensary client, I would visit them. I felt like 95% of the product out there was for men. It was just very clear. packaging, the names were clearly targeted towards a certain type of male. And that left this other huge population just not catered to. And I knew this back in 2017 and 18 and in 19. And so when Erin when Erin mentioned kind of the marketing and the type of inspiration the brand was trying to create, you get that feeling immediately as an investor. You go to their Instagram, it just feels and looks different from any type of brand. So you've got those super high-end brands that are trying to resonate with the consumer. Some of it's very knowledge-based, some of it's very scientific. And then you have like this, I'm a homie kind of brand, and I'm going to make you look good. And then you have these other brands that are more personal, in-depth, and they're trying to create a bond with you because they themselves have created a bond within the whole team. And that's what resonated with me on some of the social media marketing with Garden Society. You look at it and you immediately feel like it's women taking care of women and removing the stigma of actually using cannabis. That was my main focus, is how is this brand marketing to consumers to remove the stigma that it is okay. You are allowed as a female to consume this without feeling guilty, because we have a double standard for women, especially professional women. You know, it used to be in my mom's generation that a woman shouldn't work, right? They should just stay in the home, take care of the kids. But that slowly went away. That stigma of a woman working plus calling her a good mom at the same, in the same token. Now that's allowed. Cannabis is going to go through its evolution as well to remove that stigma. And I think the branding so far that I've seen from Garden Society has proven that women look at the brand, it resonates with them immediately. But more importantly, the connection that they're trying to have with women, especially with this whole COVID situation. You know, some people brands were marketing towards deals, discounts, This brand, on the other hand, was how can we connect women to feed the soul? Why don't we have a yoga class, a meditation class, something to calm the mind besides, and it was removing this quote unquote cannabis, but it was more centered around women and their needs, that going through a global pandemic, you can only imagine the stress level. And it was genius. It was genius marketing from the get-go. And I think from an investor standpoint, that's what you want to see from a team, is how do they poise themselves, even with a global pandemic, and they stay true to their core competency, to their main consumer. And you can see that with Garden Society. With other brands, I think it was kind of more of a volume discount model. I don't think that's going to be stable long-term. I think they've gotten a short-term uptick, but long-term, they're not going to get the brand loyalty that I think Garden Society is achieving right now and growing.
Definitely kind of feeding this back to the audience. It's really important to find that point of differentiation and that resonance. And I think that's what really has worked in building this slate, is we found investors that emotionally connected to what we were building versus just seeing the dollars, and seeing the growth from a financial perspective. It's really, do I think this brand can connect emotionally? Because we know, the high volume of women who hold the purchase power in the home and control the dollar spend. So I think that that's, something that people can take away, that there needs to be more than there needs to be that emotional connection as well.
I tell investors, I've learned, right, Sonia, being good at math, I can make Excel do anything you want it to do. And yes, I have projections. And yes, we can say in 5 years, this is the size of the company. But 5 years from today in the regulated cannabis industry is like,
shot in the dark.
Right, yeah. Exactly. And I'm like, what do you want the spreadsheet to say? Look, I can make it be a $25 billion company. I can make it be, right? And so I tell investors that you have to have that emotional, I see it and I believe it. I can feel it, because I really think that that's so true to why people, yes, the business model has to be there and the financial return has to be there and all that has to make sense, but that's also why people invested in us anyways. What's incredible is we've actually have now 18 women on our investor slate. So 18 women like Sonia who we've been able to connect with, whether we knew them before or we met them on our hunt for our slate, whether they're in cannabis. We have some leading CEOs. We have some women from some public companies. We also have some women investors who do funds. We also have women from social media platforms and from the wine industry and from other genres where they're incredible professionals, but they, again, resonated so deeply with our mission and purpose that they wanted to invest in cannabis and wanted to invest in us.
That leads really well into my next question. So, kind of going to throw you guys off a little bit. Sorry, but that leads into this other question really well. So, as hungry fish in the small pond of cannabis investing, there's a lot of us brands out there raising money constantly, and there's only so many, investors in the traditional space. So it can be easy to subconsciously lower your expectations and just feel that drive to get cash in the door, regardless, and sort of, forget about like, what do I want out of an investor? So what are some of the guardrails that you guys would suggest folks fundraising make sure that they hold up to properly vet their investors and make sure that these are people that are going to come onto the team, not just with their dollars, but with other value?
Yeah, I would say, I'll take a first stab and then I'm curious what Sonia has to say. The biggest thing that I've realized with this incredible group of women is the power of women supporting women. So Sonia is an accountant, runs her own CPA firm. And so when we were going through getting ready for a transaction and a larger investment, Sonia helped me look through the financials, clean things up. So like, I trusted her. I knew she had my best interest, right? And I knew she knew what she was doing. So like, I immediately had resources at our disposal where I didn't have to go out and try to find a new CPA firm or, it was an incredible resource that has really propelled us. So this idea of like investors with other skill sets and then how you leverage them. Karli, we have a woman who's an investor from New York City in her family office. She's an incredible marketer. So she's doing some work to help us build out some marketing programs we've always wanted to build out. We've never had the bandwidth or the team members to do it. And she's doing it in a very low cost efficient way to help us because she's invested in us. She wants us to be successful. What I'm really hesitant of, and there's a lot of it, is quid pro quo investing. So a lot of people are like, Erin, I want to invest in you, but then I want you to hire my marketing agency to do all of your paid media. And I'm like, you either invest in us or you don't. And we may or may not work with you, but we're not taking your money with the expectation that then we're going to hire you. Because that person doesn't really have your best interest at heart as a company, and you're taking their money just to basically give it back to them, right? And so that happened to us kind of early on, Karli, where we were looking at some investors who wanted an expectation. They wanted to do a licensing deal for our CBD line, right? And some people around us were like, kill it, Erin, kill it. What are you doing? Kill it. And we ended up killing it, but it took us about 4 months to get to that position to realize we needed to kill this deal because they didn't really have our company's best interest. They had their own self-interest, and we're building an incredible brand and they wanted to leverage it for themselves, not for us. So I think my biggest thing especially if you're doing high net worth investors or family offices, if it's a traditional cannabis fund, they're probably not going to have this, but if it's individuals, just be really cautious of that quid pro quo. And as good as that cash seems, it never works out right if there's strings attached.
That's great.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. If there's an expectation of hiring, an affiliate or some other firm that the investor seems to be involved with, it usually never pans out, by the way. It's nice when an investor gives you a recommendation just for the sole purpose of a recommendation, and that's it. Meaning, I know XYZ person, I worked with XYZ person or group. This is the result they were able to create. And what you do with that information, if you'd like me to make that intro, I'd be happy to do it. But the expectation that you must contract, that's the hook that everybody should be mindful of. I think another vetting process maybe co-founders or founders should consider when identifying an investor is their own track record. Have they been an advisor? Like, go on LinkedIn. Have they been an advisor to other like-kind companies that are, let's say, in the startup phase? Maybe it's not cannabis, but they've done plenty of startup advisory work or investment. Do they have any written recommendations on LinkedIn that you could just kind of peruse through and see what it feels like when someone hires that person for their respective profession? That'll give you a big clue. It's been one of my key selling points. I say we're small and mighty here at Aviva Spectrum. And I'm like, hey, you got me and this other person. Why don't you just read through? I have over 50 written recommendations for my work product. Why don't you take a look? And by the way, I have a video testimonial if you really need another thing to look at. But my point is, I feel like every investment or every move I've made, even in advisory work, I feel like, okay, what am I going to learn from this experience, right? And B, what value do I think I could commit to? So with the ladies and the team here at Garden Society, I had in my head, I was like, I bet I can create 10 qualified leads, 10. Where 10 came from, I just wanted a goal, right? And I talked to Erin, I said, hey, I think I can introduce you to newer markets in these areas. And I'm already talking to retailers anyway. So what's the worst that's going to happen? They say no, they don't want to, they don't want to talk to you. Big deal. But I think that for a team starting out, trying to select the right investors and women in particular, asking them a question like, when was the last time you referred somebody else's business without any expectation? Or can you tell me a time when, you had to, I don't know, meet a sales quota or something to that effect? You're going to start getting a hint of where is their sales and marketing hat and how do they overcome objections? Because we all get objections about all kinds of stuff. We get objections about time and get objections about value. Those are the two main reasons why people just don't want to take a meeting, right? They don't think it's going to be valuable and they don't think it's worth their time. Now, with Garden Society, I felt like this is an easy win for me. And if you come across an investor and you're like, well, how would you pitch to your, a consumer of our product? Like, how would you pitch our product to a friend of yours if you were at a cocktail party? That is a major, major great question, I think, for a lot of cannabis companies trying to find investors that would be the right match, is that it felt seamless. It felt like it was natural. It didn't feel like it was, forced upon them. It just seemed like, hey, it's like I'm having a conversation. By the way, not only did I invest in this, but here are some of the benefits, or here are some of the great things about the company. Because when you're excited, other people get excited too. So, I would caution founders to have like your top 5 questions that you think would be pertinent to an investor to say, are we really a good gel? Is this a really good match that's going to benefit us, not just from the dollar standpoint, but the relationship standpoint? And I'm glad Erin brought up my skills, which I'm happy to, talk about more in detail, but I wanted to add more to the conversation of that question of how do you also make sure you're asking just pivotal questions just to make sure it's a good marriage, it's a good match besides the dollars.
People told me this and I didn't really get it, is that your investors are like our marriage. And if you want to get an investor out after the fact, it's incredibly difficult for everyone and it's incredibly expensive. So while I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs who are hungry for cash, I need cash just to make payroll. We understand that and we know how that feels. But at the end of the day, the best thing we did was make hard decisions in our business to control our spend and cut costs and protect our business and not take on bad capital. Because now we're growing fast, we're in control, we have incredible relationships with our investors, and we're building a really impactful company versus some of those earlier days. It would have been easy to take on bad capital or at bad terms or whatever, but then we would have lost control. We wouldn't be in as healthy of a spot as we are today.
And just to add to that, there's some toxic debt instruments that are being offered to startups. This could be in any industry, but in cannabis in particular. And I think that is just a terrible idea. I don't understand how attorneys even created this type of product. They're just so used to this type of agreement in general. But if you think about a highly, highly regulated industry like cannabis, state by state by state, I would never entertain a convertible like debt instrument that had a toxic debt element to it. And what I'm getting at is those toxic debt elements are there to protect the investor so that they can swoop in, take over that asset. And then usually what they do is they don't try to find a partner to maybe merge it to something else. They actually just liquidate and get rid of it, right? And they're in charge of that whole process. And they make sure that they're made whole. That's the main point. In cannabis, you can't really do that because there's so many regulations about the equity and how the transfer of ownership, and the state needs to get involved for approval. So why these instruments exist in the startup world of cannabis it's beyond me. It blows my mind. So a simple agreement, I would not get hung up with an investor that's sophisticated and says, well, I've done this in my other deals. And they talk about this, toxic debt convertible feature. And you say, yeah, but tell me the last time you did that on cannabis when you had to execute on that portion of the agreement. How did that turn out? Right. And if they haven't done it, then you already know there's no track record for that. And I would just stay clear from that just because someone says they've done it on other deals or other startups, put your common sense hat on and just say, no, this isn't going to work.
So this kind of reminds me takes me back to when Erin and I were first setting out to fundraise, and we had these sort of ideals in our head of like, okay, we're only going to take this minimum amount and we want to have as few investors as possible. And we got to make sure that they're like the real deal. And, we kind of set out with this vision, and how that vision has changed. And I think that you guys laid out some really great guardrails for putting yourself in a position where you're taking on investors who are going to bring value and dollars. And I always had this vision in my head of investors almost like holding the reins a little bit of the sleigh, and that we were leading it, but they were always like holding on, and they could jerk back if they needed to, or they could have that control. And I think that in building this slate of female angel investors who all have, it didn't have to be this minimum big amount that we had originally set out, back in 2018 said that we were going to have. It was really more about, do these women believe in us? Do they have a good network that they can introduce us to? Do they have a certain skill set or value that we don't have that would be a strength addition to us? So I think regardless of what your company's focus is, I think thinking about like investors who are like-minded and who are actually consumers and believe in what you're building is a really great way to consider taking maybe some smaller investors versus the traditional, big funds, that kind of thing.
And there's so few big funds in cannabis doing plant-touching cannabis investments. And hello, if you're out there watching, but doing this angel route by really understanding who is our target customer. They're us, right? They look just like us. They're women 35 plus, and going after her to invest in us because she has wealth and she has success and she has the capacity and the ability and wants to be an investor also. So like finding her, AKA all of our women's slate of investors, was a great way to pair this customer with this mission, with really supporting women and working together and creating incredible synergies that I don't think, and I mean, let me be real too. We have men as well who are some of our best champions. So this isn't exclusive of men. I really believe the best advocates for women are men in the world because they have more opportunity, access to capital, access to networks than women traditionally do. But this set of women is really special to us and has really differentiated us and has allowed me to go forward to other people to say, look at the authenticity of what we've built and who believes in us. And then those women even will like call up, we just closed an incredible strategic investor. One of those women called up her friend who leads that fund and said, hey, I'm an investor in Garden Society, get on it. Sonia does incredible with getting us placed and getting momentum for us in the industry outside of her accounting work, but like just as a female consumer and an advocate, right? So that's where the real power in this lies. And I agree, Karli, like this vision of perfection has definitely changed. But that's part of being an entrepreneur, right? Is you got to be nimble and bending 8 ways from sideways and trying to figure out how to navigate.
You got to pivot. I mean, I think any investor is going to ask you the question, like, what have you done differently during COVID? I mean, that's just a clear example. COVID, I feel like I keep hearing it every second of every day. But anyways, it's kind of like, and I was mentioning this to Erin, this is maybe about a month ago. COVID is just another test. So investors that are going to be 10 years older than this current team have already gone through the '08 crisis, maybe as an executive, like upper executive. So they've gone through some crisis, and then the 2000, crisis, and so on and so forth. We can come up with that. What's unique for cannabis is dealing with this crisis, and then we have usually a leadership team that maybe they were not the CEO in their last role in the '08 crisis, right? So this investors might see this as your first true executive level test. And so, Karli, you're bringing up about, this vision originally, right? And then how it changed. And then guess what? It changed again. There's probably a different, pivot that had to happen during this time. And Erin, we should talk about some of the communication you've done to investors, because I think people joining the panel, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I get the email and I'm like, oh my God, it just calms everything down with all the negative news coming in. And we got a presidential election and this and this and this and this. Getting an email from the founders about what's going on privately, in the investment portfolio, what actions are being taken, what are you seeing, instead of the investor groups, taking in outside media and attention, which is mainly negative, getting that upward, communication, especially now. I can't tell you, I'm very grateful as an investor getting it to begin with. I can tell you other investments have not done what you've done. And I have to credit, I think, the culture and the fact that women like to communicate more than they don't want to be going into a corner going, hey, this is kind of a challenging time. Let me just go in the corner and sulk it and suppress my emotions. If anything, I think women are natural nurturers. They want to bond with other people and explain what's going on. And I compliment you. I think you guys are in the top 1% when it comes to communication with the investment community.
Yeah, totally. Sonia, I'm so glad you love it, because you're right. We love to communicate as women. And also it makes me just, I think generally speaking for women, we feel burdened. Maybe it's that's the mother of me, but if I take somebody's money, I am responsible for it. So I want you to know I'm being a good shepherd of your money. And I am, we have our own money in this too. Karli and I have a lot at stake personally. So we're shepherding this with the best leadership and the best responsibility we can. But then I also think it's important to share so we can get feedback. Have you thought about this? What about that? Erin, I'm concerned about this, things I don't think about, or Karli, you think about different. And it's been an incredible tool for us. So we do quarterly letters to our investors. One tip, write them in Word so that you can save them on your computer. I always send it as an email, but it's nice to have a Word file of every single investor letter I've ever sent out. So we always write a personalized couple sentences or paragraphs at the top, depending. But then we have a template where it's consistent and it's bullets and it's financials, performance, media, things that people care about. And there's always a call to action. And you can communicate more often, but we do it once a quarter. We say at the end of the quarter, within the month, within 30 days after the quarter closed, we're going to give you an update on the prior quarter. If it's monthly, you guys, it's way too much work. It's a lot of work to write an investor letter.
And you know what? If I got something monthly, it would be a lot.
It's a lot. So if you do it quarterly and you keep it on a template, and maybe at the end of the year, you do a longer annual report if you want. And when COVID started happening, I started sending out investor updates more readily because everybody's like, are you okay? What's going on? I don't know if you're open, like, so I think you can keep a formality or an informality to it. The other thing that's been awesome is I've sent my investor update. I forwarded it to some prospects. And I said, here's my investor update. Keep this confidential. You're not an investor yet, but this is how I communicate with you if you were to be an investor. And people love following the progress of your company. And since some of those have actually closed for Karli and I. So they said, oh, I just love your investor updates. They're incredible. They're inspirational. I want in. And it's actually kind of sealed the deal for us in the time of COVID, which I think is a real testament. But again, shorter, sweeter, financials are in there. And then the best thing I did was put it in Word, so I have it, versus like searching through my emails. What did I say?
I think that, and then the ask that you added at the end, and it's always that reminder of like, it's not just the investor and what they bring to you, but it's also making sure that, they want to help. And if you give them something to do or an ask.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You taught me that. You were like, ask for something every time.
I think it helps keep them engaged and interested, and it's a positive communication tool. So
yeah.
We're coming up to the close of our time. I know we've gone a little long. I know, Sonia, we had this last question, and I want to maybe just close with this because I think it's really interesting. So what are investors asking in their initial investment prospects given COVID versus legacy investments they made last year and now reviewing their portfolio?
Yeah, I would say, given my communication with other investors, we're looking to understand the business plan before and after COVID and what they've done to pivot. So I do know for a fact that that's happening very regularly. The second thing that I'm noticing for people who are jumping in now, investors feel like they're holding cash because they're waiting for the next shoe to drop. Okay, this is an election year. Let me give you a practical example. The multiples in equities, public company stocks, are really high right now. Okay, so the question is, well, wait a minute. How is that money, investment dollars, going into equity that's publicly traded? What about private equity, and investments? And what we're finding is that it's not directly correlated. You would think that it would be, but it's not. Real estate, people who were in it are now liquidating, getting out, even though you can borrow a lot of money from the government for, certain asset classes in real estate very cheaply. But what's happening now is investors are looking at their portfolio going, I want to jump in to real estate, but now's not a great time because there's no big discounts, right? We're trying to figure it out. There's going to be discounts in commercial real estate, maybe industrial, but the single family market, which is huge market, investors are holding off and they have this cash. So when they invest in a cannabis company or they're entertaining it, they have the cash, but now you have to pitch them differently because they're going to have an option next year of 2021. Should they hold that cash and wait for the real estate market to be a better return on investment? Or do you have a really compelling story about how you're capturing market share and that ROI is better for them in terms of their portfolio in a startup, cannabis company, or let's say you've been around for a few years and you can show the track record, even with COVID and your pivots, that look, you've maintained this base, right? You're entering in a new market. So this pivot is working, or this area of marketing is starting to become fruitful. It's okay if you trip and fall a little bit, as long as you can pick yourself up and show the investor, where you're picking up where you left off. So my point is that investors feel like holding on to cash right now because of future investment opportunities next year is available. You as co-founders and leaders in your space need to come up with a deck that kind of hits home why it would be a better investment opportunity. Either the valuation's great, you're not you didn't overvalue your company, 25 times revenue or whatever, something like that, but it's a safer bet and they're going to get a better ROI versus something in the very near future, which a lot of people are predicting it's going to be next year in 2021.
Great way to end this and round this out. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Sonia. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.